Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. It's an online platform for science and engineering professionals. The first offering of the platform is a public speaking course called Teach the Geek to Speak. To learn more about it, you can go to teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Priyanka Komala, and she has a number of degrees and a number of interests too. One of the interests I'm really interested in speaking to her about is her podcast called the Curryup Startup Podcast. And of course, because we always talk about public speaking here, we'll get into that as well. Welcome to Teach the Geek interviews, Priyanka.
Thank you so much, Neil. I'm so honored to be part of Teach the Geek. And I wanted to say kudos for actually working on this interesting topic to provide public speaking tips to STEM professionals.
Wonderful. Thank you for the compliment. If you have more of them, please send them my way.
You got it.
So I noticed from your background that you got a bachelor's in engineering. Where did that interest come from?
So two things, Neil. I grew up in India. So as part of being Asian, engineering was my default choice. So that's how I landed in engineering. But I should also say that I was really fascinated behind the science of it. And as I started getting into my course curriculum, I was really excited about creating an impact through engineering. So, though the interest started because of the cultural upbringing, the continued interest happened because of my fascination and curiosity to about, to how the world around you really works and how can you really create an impact.
Wonderful. Well, it's a good thing that even though, as you mentioned, your culture kind of is big on engineering, that you found interested in anyway, because it would have been rather tragic if you ended up going into it and found out that it's something that you didn't really like, but then perhaps you might have felt pressure to continue on with it because it's so prevalent. So luckily it worked out for you. I noticed also from the research I did on you that you ended up getting a master's in computer science. So was that something that was pushed upon you by your culture as well, or is that something that you actually wanted to do yourself?
No, that's something that I wanted to do by myself. As I mentioned, my curiosity really peaked when I started being fascinated about the different subjects that I was exposed to as part of my engineering degree. And I ended up being the top 5 in my own state as part of my ranking in my school. So I was really excited to pursue my education further, and that's how I came to the US almost a decade ago, and I did my master's in computer science at American University here in Washington, DC. And it's been a fabulous journey, I should say, Neil. Furthering your education, furthering your curiosity to really make an impact was what brought me here.
Okay. And then you didn't stop there. You ended up getting an MBA too. It seems like you're a professional student at this point. So what was the motivation to getting the MBA?
As I started my career journey as an engineer, turned into a technologist, I really felt there's more that I can contribute as part of my larger vision of creating an impact. Neil, most of the times as a technologist, you're seen as somebody who does things that somebody else asks you to do. You don't really get a seat at the table. So I felt an MBA would really help me, the business model behind the products that you work on, and 2, have a strategic seat at the table, and 3, really make an impact voicing your opinions on how technology can be a business enabler and help drive the bottom line for any organization. So that made me choose my path as an MBA professional as well from the University of Michigan Ross School of Business.
So you got a bachelor's, you got a master's, you got an MBA. So when can we expect you to get the PhD to round it all off?
That's a great question. Let's see what the future holds.
So I noticed you mentioned that as a job, you are a technologist. What exactly does a technologist do?
So I work for a scientific organization, the National Academies of Sciences, and I'm focused on, how can we use technology as a digital transformation tool to ensure the work that we do is more accessible to the general public. And we do it in several different ways to engage the community.
Interesting. I never heard that term before. So just obviously you don't have to go into your exact job description, but what is something that you're working on now as a technologist?
So we work on digital transformation projects, be it our websites and other backend applications that help us convey the information that we produce as part of our research.
Well, now that you got one question I forgot to ask, but now that you got your MBA, I know you mentioned that one of the reasons you did was to get the seat at the table. Did the MBA help you in doing that?
Absolutely. For every technology professional, any kind of professional development course or a certification really helps you with the confidence. I think that's very important to really voice our opinions on how, any product that you're working can serve the greater good of the society. So I definitely feel you have to earn your seat at the table, or sometimes, as I feel, you got to bring your own seat to the table. And, it depends on how the situation shapes up.
After all the degrees that you've received or earned, has the working world been what you expected?
The working world is always evolving, Neil. There's no hard and fast rule as to how things are going to happen. And you have the power to make things happen the way you want it to. So if you have big dreams, you got to go and achieve. Nobody's going to give it on a silver platter for you.
This is a question I started asking for the last couple of interviews I've done, and I'm actually now kind of curious I may very well ask it of everyone that I speak to. The career that you want to build for yourself, what does it look like, and what kind of setbacks do you think you'll come across to make it happen?
I'm still open about the career that I want to see for myself, but there are certain traits that I really love. Let me mention what those three are. One, it's to manage people. As a leader, no matter your rank or your job title, helping others see the vision that you have for any kind of project that you work for. That's something that really keeps me going. And two, it's being a storyteller. How do you really shape your vision in terms of a story that people can really relate to? That's very important. And three, it's to have strong ethics and integrity in any kind of work that you do. So those are the three key traits that I believe in, and any kind of career path or an opportunity that aligns with those values of mine is what I would end up doing.
Are those things that you're currently doing now, or are these things that you want to do in the future?
These are traits that I've always imbibed in myself from a very early stage of my life. I should say it's part of my upbringing and my childhood. So I've been continuing to do all of these, I should say, since the age of 5, Neil, because I gave my first public speech on an airplane at the age of 5. And since then, I've always felt these are traits that I would love to continue foraying into.
I, I posted on LinkedIn not too long ago about managing people, and I guess people oftentimes when they think about it, they think about the benefits, the I guess the coaching aspect of, and also being able to see people do better than perhaps what they thought they could do. But there's always the other aspect of managing people is you having to deal with their issues, whether they're good or bad, and oftentimes the dealing with those I guess more unseemly issues are things that perhaps managers don't take into account before they become managers. Is that something that I know you mentioned that managing people is something that is important to you? Is that something that you've already taken into account or perhaps even practiced? Just the idea that there are there are often times when you have to deal with people's problems.
That's the way world works, Neil. Be it not only just a professional life, even in our everyday life, you walk into a grocery store, you're still managing people over there, right? Like at your store clerk, dealing with any issues that you have. So managing people is just part of your lifestyle. And as you mentioned, everybody has a different take on how they see the world. And one thing that I've realized over a period of time is really understanding where the other person is coming from, because trying to get what you want is not always going to happen. So sometimes you have to look into what the other person is thinking and more focus on the empathy aspect of it to really understand, how can I resolve this issue in a way that is a mutual win-win for all of us, and at the end of the day everybody is at peace. So sometimes you have to shape up your strategies in such a way that uh, you don't get always what you want, but at least there's a middle ground where you meet others, which is still within the three traits that I mentioned.
When it comes to the people that have managed you in the past, what did you like about those managers, and what were I guess the drawbacks of those managers?
I've been honored and blessed to work with certainly amazing leaders in my life, I've really learned a lot. Because Neil, let me say this: growing up in a different culture, you come to a different country where uh, things look different. Starting from the culture, the food, the way people talk, the accent. So there are a lot of things that you have to adapt yourself as part of the learning curve. And there have been certainly amazing managers. My first internship at IBM, uh, Bill Edgar, who was my boss back then, and he's somebody that I still stay in touch with. He's been an amazing mentor in my life who really gave me an opportunity to see the world and, pick on my talents as well. So I really feel amazing bosses and leaders give you opportunities when they see that you have the capabilities to do what you're set for. So thank you for that wonderful question, because I always cherish people who have given me opportunities when I didn't really realize what is that I wanted to do next. But I had the dream of doing something that makes me feel happy and proud of. In terms of challenges, I've been lucky in terms of bosses who really invested in my success. Uh, so that's been something that I'm really blessed. But when as a podcast host, say for example, as a leader in several other projects that I do in my daily life, I try to take those lessons and try to imbibe them as much as I can when I'm dealing with people and relating myself to people-centric issues.
As you know, as you know, we're dealing with COVID-19 currently, and the economy isn't the best as it could be. There are millions that are unemployed, especially with regards to people that are coming out of school now. I'm sure they're having difficulty finding that first position, and I think a lot of them are now considering perhaps getting advanced degrees, maybe going back for a master's to make themselves more, I guess, marketable in the job market. Would be your thoughts on people going down that path, going back to school simply to make themselves marketable? I'm even saying that if the economy was good, they wouldn't even consider going back to school.
Neil, it's a tough time for all of us, in some or the other way. And going back to school, again, it's a personal preference, is what I would say. When I decided to go back to school several times in my career, I really felt the passion in me because, it's a commitment. Getting to school and doing your best and achieving what you're destined to achieve, be it a certification or a degree, is something that you have to be committed to. And hey, if that's what you want to do, go for it. But the world has evolved so much that there are several different ways to achieve what you want to do, be it a boot camp, where it's a couple of days of online course and you sit with a cohort, or be it social media, positioning yourself as an influencer who can share valuable nuggets of wisdom, be it on, say, LinkedIn or Twitter, where you share your leadership journey or your stories. Those are other ways where you can create your brand visibility as well. So there are several ways of doing it, be it at school or be it through social media, or even as a podcast host. Like, pick and choose your platform where you really want to increase your visibility, not just for the sake of it, but providing something of value to the audience as well.
I like the fact that you mentioned boot camps because I know someone here I'm on the West Coast. I'm in the San Diego area, and he has a boot camp, and a lot of the people that attend or are students in the boot camp, they come from, I guess they call non-traditional backgrounds. So they don't have computer backgrounds, and they go through this boot camp, and then they go and get jobs at a lot of these tech companies. What are your thoughts on boot camp graduates as opposed to those with computer science degrees going for these type of jobs? Are the ones that go to boot camps, are they at a disadvantage? And if so, is should they be at a disadvantage?
Neil, things have changed so much. Like 10 years ago, I had to follow a linear path in order to figure out, how do I go closer towards my career goals. So I had to go through the traditional school route. But as I mentioned, things have changed so much that the knowledge that you get at boot camp is more practical. It's more about how do you solve real life problems, right? And that puts you at the same level as somebody who goes to a traditional degree. And let me tell you something, as hiring managers, our perspective towards somebody having a traditional career path versus, somebody having a boot camp or, a different kind of a a learning experience, that mindset has really shifted. We're now focused on how can this candidate really add impact from day one? How well can they resonate with our culture? And how well, they can position themselves as a good team player. Those are traits that we're really looking for. And I believe irrespective of the path that you choose, as long as you're willing to contribute to the mission and in the success of the organization, that's what we care for. So I would say pick and choose what you decide works best for your situation and your timeline as well.
So I mentioned in the intro that I was really interested to learn more about your podcast, the Curryup Startup podcast. What was the motivation for starting your podcast?
Neil, as an Asian, as a woman of color, I always look at how do I amplify voices of my fellow Asians. And when I looked around, I didn't see a lot of platforms that would help share the stories and put spotlight on Asian entrepreneurs and leaders. So I decided to take it on myself to create this podcast as a platform. And I named it Curryup Startup to align with, the Asian flavors that people always resonate with. And it's been a great journey for me so far. It's been a year since I started the podcast journey, and I've interviewed almost 30 to 40 of my guests from all over the world, from different walks of lives. And I also interview allies of the Asian community, so people outside of the Asian community too, but somebody who can really add value. And the goal that I have is to spotlight Asian entrepreneurs to inspire and ignite conversations. So people feel that, hey, there are people out there like me who have achieved great things, and I should use that as a source of inspiration to go and achieve my own dreams.
Interesting. So the motivation you said was to amplify the voices. I know with a lot of other podcasts that perhaps they appeal to a certain group, especially if we're talking about tech, perhaps the main thrust of the podcast is to make it so that others that are in that group would at least consider that particular industry for particular tech. So for instance, if you have a podcast that focuses on women, the reason perhaps they want to amplify the voices of women is so that other women can see themselves in those positions in tech. I guess when it comes to tech, at least, I never saw Asians as being a group that needs that push to get into tech, since there's quite a number of Asians in tech already.
The various stats that talk about it, but something that there's still a vacuum is Asian leaders in tech. There's still a growing need for Asians and people of color to be part of the leadership ranks, not just being seen as a technologist or a developer as such. And my podcast, the audience for this podcast is global leaders, anybody who's looking for inspiring stories, because I focus on the personal journey of of my guest as well. So it's not just, where they are at this point in their life, but how did they get to where they are, and unveil, interesting facts about them, which would really ignite conversations.
Interesting. So I guess the goal of the podcast is not to encourage more Asians to get into tech, but it's for them to aspire to those leadership positions.
Right. And, the best part about is I also focus on Asian entrepreneurs who are in the making. For example, a children's book author who's finding her own passion writing children's books, or, somebody who started a startup. We need to amplify the voices of, these kinds of entrepreneurs. And I really enjoy talking with these budding entrepreneurs because that gives me a lot of energy and enthusiasm to really keep my inner drive going as part of my podcasting journey too.
Wonderful. When it comes to public speaking, what topics do you enjoy speaking about?
There are three major topics that I focus on. One is leadership, two, personal branding, and three, the future of tech and thoughts about my experiences as a woman in tech as well. So those are the three major topics.
Is public speaking something you've always been good at? And if not, what did you do to get better at it?
It's an interesting story. As I mentioned to you earlier, Neil, I started speaking at age 5, as part of my, my school. I had a speech competition and I raised my hand first, not even knowing what a speech competition was. And I remember vividly the first time I stood on stage and I spoke about 10 things about an airplane. So that's how I started my public speaking journey. And since then, I've really enjoyed being out there, sharing my thoughts, and I enjoy the microphone. So that's something that I realized a long time ago in my life. But let me also share an interesting experience. When I've moved to the US, as I mentioned, there are a lot of cultural challenges that you go through because you're very new to the country, you're new to the school system over here. You know, people's accent is so different. You're away from your family. So there are a lot of variables out there. And it was interesting. Somebody introduced me to Toastmasters International. And that's how I joined the Toastmasters Club. And there's a session called Table Topics or Speaking Off the Cuff, where they give you a topic and you just have to speak. And I remember the first time I went in there as a guest just to sit back and figure out how this works. And somebody picked on me and said, hey, why don't you speak on XYZ? And I literally froze because everybody's attention was towards me. And I was like, I just can't do this. But then after the end of that session, I thought about, what do I want to do? How do I shape this experience? Because I've been a good public speaker all my life, but now adapting to a different culture was a little bit of challenge. And I decided I'm going to take up this challenge. I became a Toastmasters member and I ended up being the Distinguished Toastmaster, which is the highest award that you can get as part of your journey. And I've mentored several people as part of my journey to help them be better speakers and better storytellers.
When it comes to the speaking that you do you have a process for putting your presentations together? And if so, what is it?
So you meant by process, can you clarify a little bit?
Oh, yeah. So before you give any kind of presentation, you have, I'm going to do this first, and then this, and then that, a process essentially, I guess a system for putting your presentations together.
Got it. I always create a mental mind map because I believe in thinking through in my mind. That's how I operate rather than writing things down. So first I create a mental mind map as to how the flow of the conversation or the talk is going to be. And then I jot down high level notes as to, how the transitions are going to happen. And the best part about all is this is something that my parents taught me as a young child. I practice my speeches in front of a mirror. So my body posture, my voice, the way I'm putting out my facial expressions, all of those, I look at my body language by practicing in front of a mirror. And I think that's really helped me.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent in practicing as well. I have a friend who doesn't practice his speeches much at all, and I can definitely tell the difference between mine and his. He makes fun of me. I don't make fun of him. I feel sorry for him.
Everybody has a different way of prepping up, right?
When it comes to before giving presentations, do you ever get nervous? And if so, how do you deal with your nerves?
I enjoy doing such talks and I really feel excited. So the first thing, there's sometimes you still have jitters because when I've been a keynote speaker at several, places, there are times where, there's a huge audience and you just have to constantly believe in yourself. So the first tip I would say is believe in your story. You have value in what you're sharing and you deserve the audience. And two is have a big smile on your face. That makes you feel relaxed and it's a great stress buster. The power pose also helps, like a superwoman. It just gives you immense confidence. And three, drink a lot of water. I hydrate myself always before I go on stage, and that really keeps all your senses interconnected.
Wonderful. This has been really interesting learning more about you, Priyanka. Is there anything else that you'd like to add about things that you're working on?
No, thank you so much, Neil. You do amazing work with Teach the Geek, and I think it's a much sought after need in the community, especially for STEM professionals who can further their career journey by being better storytellers. So I think that's a wonderful combination to have. And I love doing what I'm doing, and I'm happy to be of help in any way I can to fellow STEM professionals as well. And if you're interested in hearing more inspiring stories, you can check out Curryup Startup podcast on YouTube. We're on social media and on all podcast streaming platforms.
Wonderful. And thank you for the second compliment. If you have any more, you can always email them to me.
Hey, we're going to post it on social media as well.
Well, everybody, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. It's an online platform for science and engineering professionals. Teach the Geek to Speak is the first offering. It's a public speaking course, and you can check it out at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thank you, Priyanka.
Thank you. Bye.